Ole Miss is accusing Lane Kiffin of trying to, quote, destroy our locker room. Oh, you got to hear this. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. And thank you also for watching on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. College football playoff is here. FanDuel is the best place to get in on the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com and get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. This is an LSU show. It's by name, Locked On LSU. We talk about LSU. But to the extent which things outside of the LSU ecosystem affect LSU, we will discuss them. And the dead period lifted on Thursday, and there were a slew of portal visitors to campus that I want to get to, including already a commitment from another offensive player. So I'm going to get into all of that in this episode, but I have to start by stepping back and probably pointing and laughing a little bit at Ole Miss, which I think you LSU fans are going to enjoy this. The Ole Miss fans watching are going to clench your fist, huff and puff, and slam the table. But I'm not sure if you've noticed what's happened in the last 24 hours in Oxford. And again, this isn't an Ole Miss show. To the extent this affects LSU, I'm going to talk about it because there are accusations now being levied against Lane Kiffin for causing what is happening at Ole Miss. So let me tell you what's happening and then tell you what the accusations are with quotes from anonymous sources, which are absurd. I'll get to it. Ole Miss seemingly had done an incredible job of roster retention. A lot of the players we talked about who were key parts of their playoff run, Trinidad Chambliss, Kejuan Lacey, Deuce Alexander, Lucas Carniero, a lot of Prince Williman Mielen, a lot of players that were really integral parts in building blocks moving forward. Well, here in the last 24 hours, all of a sudden the floodgates have opened. And if you haven't seen it, there have been contracts apparently that were leaked of Ole Miss signees that were worth more than what retained players were making. And so a lot of the players who were retained, now knowing these numbers, are very upset and have started entering the transfer portal. Even players that had already committed to coming back, players like Devin Harper and Prince Will Uman Mielen. Actually, if you look at the list of portal entrants, Uman Mielen, who's a fantastic edge, TJ Hedrick, who's a young offensive tackle, who's now committed to Auburn, Deshaun Womack, former LSU Tiger, TJ Daugherty, who a 2-year starting linebacker who visited LSU on Thursday, Devin Harper, who we mentioned, Corey Amos. I can go down the list of players, DJ Holmes, TJ Banks, whether or not these guys were going to be impactful parts of the Ole Miss team in 2026, and some of them certainly were not. The point is, a lot of guys who had even already committed to coming back are now leaving. And so for LSU fans, it's a great opportunity to point and laugh. But what's interesting is there's this bubbling sentiment from Oxford that this is Lane Kiffin doing this, that it was Lane Kiffin who leaked those contract terms a day before the transfer portal closes to cause this unrest in Oxford, to cause these players who had already committed to stay to leave before Ole Miss could do anything about it because the portal window is about to close. And if you don't believe me, okay, you don't have to listen to me. You may know who Ben Garrett is. I've never met Ben, but he kind of became sort of infamous because he's the one who on a podcast called Lane Kiffin a hoe. And then Lane Kiffin confronted him about it, and he sort of cringed like a scared child on the field in that instant, like, ghost white-looking face just stonewalled. That him. He tweeted out a link, and the tweet reads, I'm reading this directly, Lane Kiffin is trying to cause chaos. Ole Miss and LSU have two of the nation's best portal classes, but this isn't friendly competition. Quote, Kiffin is trying to destroy our locker room. There's a link to the story. Now, he works for Ole Miss Spirit. All their stuff's typically behind a paywall. This is not, so I'm assuming this article is going to do very well because he's playing to his base. The lead is Lane Kiffin is trying to cause chaos. He mentions about the portal window closing at 11:59 p.m. on Friday. And he writes that what's happening now isn't just a mad dash for late additions. It's a stress test of contracts, of locker rooms, and whether anything in the sport actually carries consequence anymore. He goes on effectively to blame Lane Kiffin for what's happening right now. He's talked about trying to get some of the players that ultimately stayed, and now players that ultimately stayed like Kewan Lacey, Prince Willimon Mielen, Devin Harper, others, TJ Daughtery, and others. He writes of Kiffin, he's fighting dirty and he's banking on no one stopping him. Quote, the Rebels are in hand-to-hand combat with Kiffin and LSU, end quote, one Ole Miss source says. Again, you want to talk about absolutely trash journalism. This is a definition of it. You slander someone and you don't actually have that quote on the record. So we have it could be a janitor in the building, who knows, or it could be completely made up. But that's apparently what this guy does. This guy who calls the head coach a hoe and thinks that it's okay to do that. He also quoted another source saying, quote, Kiffin is trying to destroy our locker room, end quote, a program source says. He writes, those moves, however, are supposed to supplement a roster, not replace key returners lost to sabotage. He's accusing Lane Kiffin of sabotage. Again, this is I have a giant problem with fans posing as journalists. If you're a fan in the media, that's fine. Just identify yourself as what you are. If you're posing as a journalist, as a reporter, and you're accusing a coach of sabotage, and you have only an anonymous source saying that, and you run that, if I was Lane Kiffin and I cared enough, I'd probably sue him for defamation, which he could certainly win. There's a case to be made there. But all I would say is this. Let's operate under, they're in full meltdown mode, which is hilarious, but let's operate under the assumption, just for a brief moment, that he's right, that it is Lane Kiffin. And I could make an argument that anything that's ever been leaked to damage someone else, or that was done so by someone who had a reason, an intention of having that person or that entity be damaged by this information getting out. Kind of like when Ole Miss leaked that they were building a tampering case against Lane Kiffin. Weird how that works, right? So the point is, go back to when Lane Kiffin came to LSU, okay? And I told you on this show, if you're an everydayer, you heard me say this because we talked about it quite a bit, that it was abundantly clear that Ole Miss was going to do things intentionally to try to embarrass or hurt Lane Kiffin at LSU. It wasn't sufficient enough just to say, thank you for what you did here for 6 years. Good luck. We'll move on. We hope to beat you in September. They were adamant that they were going to sort of get back at him. And I told you this, all of this. They were going to go after LSU coaches, LSU staff members, LSU players in the portal, Carius Kern, Austin Thomas. Go down the list. Frank Wilson. Go down the list. They were going to recruit high school kids from Louisiana. They were going to try to retain their players to keep them away, even overpaying to keep them away from Lane Kiffin and LSU, all with the intent of trying to paint the scenario that the current players didn't want to play for Lane. They wanted to play for Pete Golding. That staff members at LSU didn't want to work under Lane. They'd rather work for Pete Golding, get away from Lane Kiffin. That was all very intentional. And so if what you're saying, if what, the guy who called Lane Kiffin a hoe is writing, it is true that this is Lane Kiffin who leaked these contracts to create this unrest at Ole Miss, and whether or not these players come to LSU or anywhere else, they're just not at Ole Miss. Let's say hypothetically that is true. Well, you should have pissed him off. We can all agree, and I agree. I said it a million times on this show and everywhere. There's no way I would have let Lane Kiffin coach the playoff. Because if the shoe was on the other foot, if the LSU coach was leaving for Alabama, there's no way we would be okay with him coaching the playoff. I'm in agreement with everyone at Ole Miss on that. It was the right decision to not let him coach. But if he had left and you hadn't done everything that you had done by way of coercing staff and overpaying to keep players and bringing in LSU players and all things public, and the tampering allegations and the comment that the Ole Miss, the Grove collective head made those comments in the article to Ross Dellinger that effectively slandered Lane Kiffin. He reads everything. You see him on social media. He sees everything. He's probably watching this right now. Hey, coach. I mean, it's probably happening. Well, guess what you did? You picked a fight. And so you know what he did? He swung back, assuming you're right. And you may not be. It's your fault. It's your fault. You kicked the anthill. Like, you can't run up to the pit bull, slap him in the face, and be mad when the pit bull bites your arm off. So, here you go. And if the benefit of LSU, the dual-pronged benefit of LSU hiring Lane Kiffin was not only did you make your program stronger, which clearly has happened, but you weakened a rival. Well, Ole Miss is really up against it right now because the portal closes on Friday. If they're able to retain some of their key players, they're going to have to spend even more. Some of those guys probably already going to go. So it'll weaken their roster, and they don't have the opportunity now to go replace those players with equal or better players. So their roster is going to be weakened. It's probably just sabotage by Lane Kiffin, right? Says the guy who called Lane Kiffin a hoe on a podcast. And other people on the internet who read that and are trying to spew that nonsense. Or maybe they're right. And maybe that's the lesson learned, is when you're a runt, don't go pick a fight with the biggest dog on the block. You might just get your hand bit off. So while the biggest dog on the block continues building his roster at LSU, they had a whole bunch of visitors and got a commitment on Thursday. We'll tell you about next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. College football playoff is here, and FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. But here's what I love about it. You get to use the profit boost on the bets you already feel good about. You want to ride with the favorite when you think a team controls the matchup, like in the championship game. You love Indiana. You want to boost that bet? You can do it. You want to take a shot on the underdog Miami because you feel the upset coming? You can do it. Then you apply the profit boost to go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the best place to get in on the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. That's FanDuel. I want to get back here in just a quick second into LSU's portal class, which continues building. But I do want to take a quick second and thank you again for making Locked on LSU your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked on the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, please go check out our new Everydayer Club. It gives you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked on LSU, compatible with Apple, Spotify, all the major podcast apps, and an invite to the members-only Locked on Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. So please tap the link in the show notes if you want to learn more. So LSU does, in fact, as remember, Thursday, the dead period ended, and so visitors were allowed back on campus. And boy, there were a slew of them from visiting LSU on Thursday. I did on Twitter put out this list just very quickly as I run through it. Couple of offensive linemen, Devin Harper from Ole Miss, Alio Ba from Maryland visited. Zach Grace, tight end from Oregon, his brother Theo Grace, who's a linebacker at North Dakota. They were both on campus. Couple more wide receivers because why not? Sterling Burkhalter from Wake Forest, big 6'5" receiver. Andy Jean, started his career at Florida. This year played at Arkansas. He visited. Fahim Delane, the safety, younger brother of Mansour Delane, spent his freshman season at Ohio State. And then they were all, and TJ Daugherty as well, the linebacker from Ole Miss. They were all on LSU's campus on Thursday on their visits. There might have been more. Oh, by the way, there was one more, as a matter of fact. It was an offensive lineman from, it was an offensive lineman from Nichols, played his freshman season at Rummel. Jamard Jones is his name. Played his freshman season is from Rummel, freshman season at Nichols, now in the portal, and visited LSU on Thursday. And the Tigers did, in fact, land a commitment out of these portal visits, as we told you to keep an eye on. So Zach Grace, the tight end from Oregon, tight end H-back, visited LSU and committed on Thursday on his visit. Now, he is your prototype. Tight end, H-back, 6'3", 240, over 100 snaps this season, and he's got a couple of years of eligibility left. Now, in 2024, he played 41 snaps, so little used. And then while he didn't have any snaps, any stats, like rushing or receiving stats, he played special teams. It was largely a blocker in 2025. Again, 6'3", 240, H-back, fullback. And when you think about what you have at tight end and returning Trey'Dez Green, and then bringing in the tight end from Isaiah Williams from Pitt, now you're talking about needing someone who maybe, those are pass catching tight ends. You're talking about needing someone who maybe fits more of the mold of a blocking tight end, and that's what you have here with the addition of Zach Grace. By the way, Malachi Thomas, forgive me, Malachi Thomas is the tight end from Pitt who they got committed. So it was also interesting that in addition to Zach Grace, his younger brother, as I mentioned, was also a visitor on Thursday, Theo Grace. Now, Theo Grace is a freshman linebacker who just played his freshman season at North Dakota, the University of North Dakota, and came down with his brother. So it would stand to reason that if you sign Zach Grace, you're probably going to sign Theo Grace. Well, I'm totally speculating there. I don't know the answer to the test, but that's one worth keeping an eye on. Now, the other players that I think you need to keep an eye on, okay, and I'm going to talk about the offensive line specifically in just a minute, but we mentioned TJ Daugherty, and I think this is one that's trending toward LSU. Daugherty played the first 2 years of his career at Clemson. The last 2 years he played at Ole Miss, where he started every game the last two seasons. This year, and by the way, 6'2", 230. So he's a big physical off-ball linebacker. This year, 98 tackles, 5.5 TFLs, 1.5 sacks. And what's interesting is that no linebackers left LSU. I mean, you had a fifth-year senior in West Weeks who's out of eligibility, but Whit Weeks is back. Devon Keys, Tylen Singleton are back. The four freshman linebackers that you signed, Keelan Moses, Charles Ross, CJ Jim Coyley, Zach Weeks, they all returned. That's Blake Baker's position group, but you're looking to add a veteran here, a multi-year starter in the SEC going into his fifth year of college, who very well could fortify that group playing next to Whit Weeks. Fahim Delane is another interesting one that got to keep an eye on. Just finished his freshman season at Ohio State. He was a top 100 overall prospect in the country. Coming out of Maryland, signed with Ohio State, played in 13 games, played about 150 snaps, half of them on special teams, half of them on defense. Again, played in 13 games. So he's got 3 years remaining of eligibility. Now, you brought in Ty Benefield from Boise State. So Benefield and then returning Cooley and Spears, probably set at safety as far as your starters. But here's a guy in Delane who's a super high ceiling guy, 6'2", 210, who in 2027 could very well be in line to be a starter, giving you some depth here in 2026. Again, something we've talked about a lot is in this portal class, LSU has been very intentional in adding players with multiple years of eligibility remaining, guys who have played major college football with multiple years of eligibility remaining. So you're not right back in the spot next year rebuilding your roster again via the portal. And another name to keep an eye on is Mason Dossett. Texas A&M is also in the mix here. He plays at Baylor. His dad played at Baylor in the late 90s. Had a little cup of coffee in the NFL with the Packers. So Dossett's interesting. He's a two-sport guy. He's not only a football player, but also he's a sprinter who runs the hurdles at Baylor. Played safety his freshman season. Played wide receiver this year. I'm told he's switching back to safety in 2026. Depth guy, special teams. And by the way, his brother is a big-time safety recruit for 2027, who's also already got some major offers like Texas A&M and Illinois and Oklahoma State, Kansas State, some Power 4 offers. So Mason Dossett's another one to watch, but as I understand it, Texas A&M also is in the mix there. So just a few of the players worth keeping an eye on here as the portal cycle rolls on. The portal closes on Friday, but remember, players don't have to announce their destination Friday. Friday's just the deadline for players to put their name in the portal. So by the time the portal closes on Friday, we will know definitively what the market looks like, who is available in the portal to finish out your signing class. So we'll know that on Friday. Now, there's no bigger need that LSU has, of course, than offensive line. We'll go a little deeper on that to wrap up Locked on LSU. It's your team every day. I think we could all objectively agree that LSU's worst position group in 2025 was the offensive line. And if I look at LSU's roster today, with, as we sit right here, 31 additions via the portal, and the players you brought back, and I look at the entire roster, I could confidently say that the worst position group on LSU still right now is the offensive line. Because you lost 8 guys via the portal. 6 of them have played a lot of football for you. DJ Chester played in 24 games with 14 starts. Tyree Adams, 18 games with 11 starts. Cohen Eccles, 18 games with 8 starts. Paul Mabenga, 20 with 11. Karius Kern played in 8 games with 5 starts as a freshman. Ori Williams played in 13 games with 2 starts. Ethan Callaway and Tyler Miller are the other 2. But you combined to lose 8 guys who had combined to play in 102 games with 51 starts. Now, it is fair to say that was your worst position group. So is this addition by subtraction? You lost guys who had played a lot, but guys who had not played well. The key is replacing them with guys who have experience, but have played better than the guys you lost. And I don't think you can definitively say that right now. You've added 4 portal offensive linemen as of today. Jaquan Sprinkle from NC Central, 2-year starter. Jacoby Jones from Colin Junior College, 19 games, 2-year starter. And then 2 SEC backups, William Satterwhite from Tennessee and Darren Stray from Kentucky. Satterwhite's played 11 games over 2 years, all as a backup. Stray's played 4 games this year as his true freshman. He took a red shirt. So you've added 4 guys. But if you go back in our everydayer shout out, you heard me say this at the start of the portal cycle, I was told some of the parameters. They're probably going to sign about 30 players, single-digit defensive players. Overwhelmingly, they were going to go offense. And on the offensive line, they were going to be looking for 2 guards and a tackle. Well, look at who they returned. Braylon Moore, Weston Davis. So what do you have? What did you need to add? 2 guards and a tackle. They haven't done that yet. Maybe Jaquan Sprinkle and Jacoby Jones will come in and compete for a starting job and maybe win one. Maybe a guy like Solomon Thomas, a former 5-star, emerges this year and can be a starter for you. Maybe one of the freshmen come in, like a Bryson Martinez, who's super athletic. Maybe Lamar Brown plays offense. I don't think that's going to happen. And he wants to play defense, but he could if you needed him to. So you look and say, you're still waiting on the starting caliber players to be added via this portal class. And I'll give you a few names to keep an eye on. Now, we've talked plenty about Jordan Seaton already. He's the number 1 offensive tackle in the portal from Colorado, started 22 games. The price tag is probably going to push $4 million. Now, you've seen internet rumors about visits. I've told you all along that I have not heard anyone credible say he's coming for a visit. And on Thursday, we learned his first scheduled visit was Texas this weekend. And then there was a report that he's visiting Mississippi State. So he's presently at Mississippi State and set to go to Texas this weekend. But no LSU visit as of this very moment is scheduled. That could change. But as of this moment, no LSU visit is scheduled. I expect LSU will try to make a push. I don't know if financially LSU can be in that conversation. Again, we'll see. I'm not putting anything past Lane Kiffin, as we talked about in the previous episode, but still no visit planned. Devin Harper was on LSU's campus on Thursday. Multiple sources within the program seem to believe that he is an LSU lean. Kid from Shreveport, Calvary Baptist, longtime LSU commit, flipped to Ole Miss last year before signing day, redshirted this year at Ole Miss, now in the portal, could very well be a plug-and-play starter. He was a projected starter for Ole Miss in 2026, but he's one of the guys here that was a late defection. So Devin Harper has not been a starter, but could very well be one, as he was expected to be one at Ole Miss in 2026. We've talked about Sean Tompkins from Baylor. He played in 10 games this year in his second year there in Waco, started 5 games as a left tackle. So he has played, has started, but doesn't have great depth of experience. there at Baylor. And then the other one that I'll tell you, who we said, was a visit a visit on Thursday, was Alio Ba from Maryland. So this was a guy who started at right guard the last 2 seasons at Maryland. So a big offensive lineman who is a multi-year starter. His Pro Football Focus pass blocking grade was a 72.3, only allowed 2 hurries the entire season, did not allow a sack, and only had 2 penalties. He was a 4-star coming out of high school, and he had big-time offers. At one point was committed to Georgia, had offers from Bama, Florida State, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Tennessee, Texas, and others. He redshirted in 2022 and then began to play and started each of the last 2 seasons there in College Park. So Aliou Ba, again, a big-time prospect with multiple years of starting in the Big Ten, was on LSU's campus at guard, was on LSU's campus on Thursday, and that's conceivably a guy who would be a plug-and-play Power 4 starter. So another name worth keeping an eye on as they move through. Remember, the portal closes on Friday, but that's just the deadline for players to enter their names. It doesn't mean you're going to learn of all the commitments. You'll still have visits subsequent. LSU's semester did start on Monday, and so you have about 10 more days until the final drop date to be enrolled. These guys are going to participate in spring. They got to be enrolled in the spring semester, so you are getting closer to that. So don't expect this is going to linger, but these are a few names worth keeping an eye on. LSU's got to go improve that offensive line. And it's really the biggest charge that they have left. And we'll see if maybe, just maybe, they might be able to snag a few more Ole Miss Rebels along the way. Of course, we'll be talking about it right here on Locked On LSU. So do me a favor. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And please let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day.